It has been a while since I have issued a content warning or trigger warning. A while back, I put content and trigger warning in the bio for my podcast, and I quit issuing the individual trigger warnings with each episode. But I think this one's going to require one. I will be talking pretty in depth about a lot of the abuse that I have experienced in my life, and it may get pretty graphic. So if that's not something that you want to listen to or don't have the space for today, this episode might need to be on the wait list for you. There is a condition called multi-organ system failure that I saw a lot in the hospital when I was working in the ICU and the ER, and especially a lot during COVID. It is something that happens when your body is in such a diseased state that multiple organs and organ systems start shutting down. And your body is incredible in that it is always working to maintain or achieve, if it's not there, homeostasis, which means everything is balanced and everything is working properly. Your organs are really good at picking up slack for organs that may not be able to do their job. We see this a lot with the kidneys and the lungs, especially if the lungs are having problems getting rid of CO2 and they're retaining too much of it. The kidneys pick up the slack and they get rid of other ions so that all of the chemicals are balanced correctly in the body. And when you see multi-organ system failure, what you see is the failure of the ability to compensate. That the kidneys can't make up for the lungs, and the heart can't make up for the lungs, and the liver can't make up for the kidneys, and everything is shutting down because nothing has the ability to compensate adequately enough for the other thing that it should be compensating for. The solution would probably be mass transplant, but that's not really a solution ever, because when the body is in that weakened and diseased state, even if you had all of the organs available, the body could most likely not survive surgery because it is so weak. So when we see this happening where multiple organ systems are shutting down, those of us who work in healthcare tend to know it's basically a death sentence. And the inevitable will be coming soon. Because when systems that are meant to keep other systems balanced in place fail to do so and become weakened themselves in the effort, then the entire body becomes non-viable. And I'm not giving this story to give you a health lesson. The body is an allegory for the world. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. I am not going to bore you with the gore of my experience in healthcare and talking about livers and kidneys and lungs and hearts and things shutting down and hospice and things like that. But that was what I woke up this morning, the thought of multi-organ system failure. And as I was thinking about it and how much it relates to the United States of America right now, I really started thinking a lot about my dad. For a really long time, I believed that I could convince my dad to be a good person. And here's why. When you grow up in a Christian home where everyone goes to church, everyone's allegedly following the Bible, everyone ascribes to the same set of morals, more or less, you have this idea that everyone is trying to do the right thing. Everyone's trying to be good. Everyone's trying to follow God. Everyone's trying to follow the Bible. And I knew my dad wasn't from a pretty early age. Even with all of the indoctrination, it became very evident that, even in elementary school, it became evident that he did not care about controlling his temper. He did not care about taking accountability for his actions. And he held himself to a different standard than he held everyone else to. But I thought, he just doesn't get it. In my naivety, I thought, if someone could just have the conversation with him in just the right way, where he would understand, he would stop being so mean. I eventually gave up that idea. I realized how futile that effort would be, but also when someone creates their own truth that is completely at odds with reality, you cannot have a conversation with them about the truth of their actions. When I was in my early teens, I was forced into livestock shows with 4-H. My little sister wanted to show pigs, and I was told that I had to show one too because she was. I had no interest in it. I didn't enjoy it the entire year. I didn't want to continue it. I was a little bit prissy during that time. I really didn't like getting dirty. I certainly didn't like being around the mud. I didn't like pigs. They weren't, it wasn't my thing. And being forced into that was just, it was the absolute worst. You're 13 years old and being forced to do something that you really don't want to do like that. It's just the end of the world. The worst thing you could ever imagine. We finished the show year, and I was glad to be done with it. And then I found out there was a winter show. And once again, I was forced into showing a pig and enjoyed that just about as much. Actually, probably less because it was extremely cold. The state show was in February. It was freezing. We had to go down, taking care of the pigs every day, and there was ice in their water. We'd have to break up the ice. It was miserable, absolutely miserable. So at the end of the winter show, we were driving home from the show, and my dad asked if I wanted to show again. And he said, you've done it for a couple of seasons now. I won't make you do it again if you don't want to. I said, cool, I don't want to. And he said, why not? And something in me got really brave in that moment, because it wasn't just that it was gross. It wasn't just that I had to go outside and deal with all of the ice and the cold and do a lot of work that I didn't want to do. It was really that he was so mean. He was so ill-tempered in the work that we were doing, and every time we were at shows, whether he was backing up the trailer or we were loading the pigs into the pens or anything that we were doing, he was so ill-tempered, and he would lose his temper constantly. He would yell at us, and I didn't like being around him when he was like that. And he asked me why I didn't want to, and I said, because you're not very nice to me when we're doing this. And he said, what do you mean? And I gave him example after example of how he had talked to me like I was trash, how he had yelled at us, how he wouldn't be patient with us regardless of what was happening, how he didn't really help us. He just showed up – on occasion and then acted like it was his pet project and he started crying. And in hindsight, I know that should have been a red flag. But I didn't at the time because it wasn't something he had really done before. And he said that a big part of the reason why he lost his temper was because of his low blood sugar or his high blood pressure. And he asked for us to point it out to him, to check him when he did stuff like that again, to just say, "Hey, Daddy, you're doing it again." That's what he told us to say. And he said, "Would you consider doing it for another season and giving me another chance?" So I said yes. And a few months went on. It was getting close to summer, which is when you picked up the pigs for the fall season. So we were making some repairs and reworking the pig pen. The whole family was down there working on it. And my dad has never been a good communicator. He has never been good at explaining what he wants someone to do, especially when it comes to physical acts. Like if you're moving furniture or working on something that you're building or whatever. He's never been good at that. And it's okay that he's not good at it. But he gets frustrated when people don't understand him and blames the other person for not understanding what he could not communicate. This was another incidence of this happening. We were moving some boards, and he was trying to tell my mom and my older sister to move a board in a certain direction, but he was being very unclear about it, and he cussed at them. And I need for you to understand that that never happened. There was not even a gosh darn that came out. They didn't say gee. They didn't say golly. All of those were considered cuss words. There was no cussing. There were no expletives in my house, ever. Ever. It was considered sinful. And my dad said to my mother, "Let go of the damn board." My mama looked like she caught the vapors. And I was like, "Oh, it's my moment to shine." And so I waited till, boards were set down and everything was safe. And then I approached him and I said, "You told us to tell you. You're doing it again." And he said, "Nope, this isn't that. It's because they weren't listening and they didn't do what they needed to do." And I never said it to him again because there was no excuse for him talking to her like that. And you might think, oh, that's not that bad. For the way that we talked in our house, he might as well have called her a fucking bitch. It was the equivalent. And I realized that he was never going to change. He was never going to listen. He didn't care that we were always going to be wrong in his eyes. No matter the circumstances, no matter whether we really were or not, we would always be the ones in the wrong because he could not be the perpetrator in any circumstance ever in his own mind. And so I realized that no matter how much we were the victims of him, he would always blame us. For a long time, I thought if I tried to comply with what he wanted of me, what he expected, and paid attention to the things that he said mattered or the things that he seemed to esteem above others and tried to embody those things, that maybe things would be a little bit different, that maybe he would respect me more. And it was a little different before and after he beat me with the 2-by-6 shortly before my 15th birthday. But I was always just trying to be the person that I thought was a person that he would respect. And it took me a really long time to figure out that he would never respect me because I was a woman, because I was female. I wasn't a woman yet then. And I didn't understand that at the time. I understand that now. But he really doesn't respect anyone who is not himself. And quite frankly, he doesn't even really respect himself, if we're being honest. But I thought that if I could just, do what he wanted me to do and be the kind of person that he talked about with respect, that then it wouldn't be so bad for me. And maybe he would even listen to me sometimes. And I look back on that now with a lot of sadness for myself, because I became a person who was not me. I cut myself off from the things that made me, the things that made me good, because I was trying to get him to like me, and I was trying to be safe in an environment that was never going to be safe. I'm going to repeat that. I was trying to be safe in an environment that was never going to be safe. And for even longer than I thought that I would be able to convince my dad that he was wrong and that he could be kinder and he didn't have to be so mean, I thought that I could convince my mom. Now, my mom was not abusive in the same ways that my dad was. My mom was a lot more subtly abusive. She had her moments. I'm not going to say she was never physically abusive or verbally abusive, but most of her abuse was emotional, and it was very much in the indoctrination. She is the one who planted the seeds of the ideas that you're worthless, that you have to stay here, that you owe him respect, that his word is what's important. Doesn't matter if it's not true. Doesn't matter if it seems wrong. You don't get to decide what's wrong. He does. I thought for a long time that she really knew how bad he was, at least to a degree, because she was the victim of his abuse at least as much as we were. Maybe not the physical abuse as much as we were, but certainly still to a degree. And I thought that if we could all just find the ability to realize how messed up this was, that we could just be nice to each other and we could have peace. And it took me longer to realize that my mother was never going to come around than it did for me to realize that my father wasn't. But the reason that my mother is never going to come around, because it is so much more convenient and comfortable for her to stay where she's at, despite how abusive her situation is, than it is for her to stand up to her abusive husband. And I think so often now about the dichotomy of abuse, because no one is abusive all the time. No one would stay with someone if they were abusive all the time. No one would stay with someone who was abusive if they led out the relationship with abuse. If someone walked up to you and beat you up, there is no way that you would go out on a date with that person. If someone did that on a first date, you would not give them a second date. They wait until you're invested, until you love them, until you trust them. Then they start with little things. Little crossing of boundaries, a little push beyond what you're comfortable with, a little bit meaner than they used to talk. And they push and they push and they push, testing the waters to see what you'll tolerate. How much can they get away with? And you won't leave. Because my dad did a lot for us. He worked multiple jobs to make sure that we had food on the table and roof over our head, etc. Now, he never let us forget that, but he worked very hard to make sure his family was taken care of. And he would do little things too. Like he very often would make us homemade popcorn. He got this popcorn machine because he knew we all liked popcorn, and he would make us specialty popcorn just because he knew we all liked it, and buy special games and movies and things like that. Granted, most of the little things that he did were buying things, but they weren't all moments of terror and anguish. And so you would fool yourself into thinking that maybe it was just, he just had a bad day. Because love does not keep records of wrongs. And while I don't believe that he ever loved me, or anyone for that matter, I do love him. And so I didn't think about that he owed me, or that it had been this many times that he had done this thing, because he was my dad. And so you forgive him. And I think it's really easy to do in abusive relationships or abusive systems, because most people don't enter a system thinking it's a terrible system. It's the same as you don't enter a relationship that becomes abusive knowing it's an abusive relationship. And so it's really easy to kind of do the mental gymnastics of, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it's just a bad day. Oh, it's just a one-off. That's never the case with an abusive system or an abusive relationship. And the other thing that I really was thinking about this morning was the isolation and the othering that happened within our family and is very common in abusive relationships and systems. That there were no allies. My mother wasn't an ally. My sisters weren't an ally. They were all potential spies. And some of them were, absolutely. And I myself was to them. Oh, I saw her do this. And oh, I was there and this happened. And you try to endear yourself by tattling. You would try to form an alliance with the abuser and find yourself in their good graces by ratting out someone else. And the ironic thing was it never worked out that way. In fact, more often than not, it would turn into you getting abused too. There was just this idea of not being allied with the rest of the family. It was really unspoken, but everyone was your enemy to a degree. Because if he was mad at them, you're not going to take up for them. You're going to save yourself. You're going to cower in the corner or hide in your room or go outside to play so you don't have to hear it and you're not around for any of it. Though that was also very scary because then you can't hear what's going on, because sometimes you might hear him say something about you, and hearing your name at least gave you the ability to prepare yourself for what was coming. And it was very much a every man for himself kind of situation. And I think about that a lot now, because if you haven't picked up on it yet, if you haven't figured it out, this episode is not about my dad, and this is not about my childhood. I thought that if I could convince my dad that he was wrong, he would stop being abusive. And I thought if I could convince my mom that he was abusive, that she would do something to stop him. And if you haven't picked up the allegories, my dad is the fascist wing that has taken over this country, and my mom is the Democrat Party. There's no amount of voting that's going to change anything. There's no amount of talking that's going to fix anything. There's no working within the system that will fix anything, because just like a body with multi-organ system failure, there's no fixing a broken system. There is no repairing it from within. Trying to work within a broken system to fix the system is insanity. And we've been doing it over and over again for my whole life, if not longer. I'm not going to speak to history, but for my entire life, I have heard people talking about working within the system to make things better, and it has only served to make things worse. Progressively. Worse and worse and worse. And people want to blame the Republicans and people want to blame the Democrats. And the fact of the matter is we have a wealthy oligarchy and a fascist system that is irreparable. There's no protest that's going to fix it. There's no voting that's going to fix it. There's no calling your congressmen or senators that's going to fix it. The system is broken. It doesn't work. And I am not going to disagree with anyone who says the system is not broken, that it's working exactly as it was designed to. The point of the matter is you're not going to fix it for the common man. Whether it's broken or whether it was designed against us, it's not going to work for us. And we are screaming into the void right now, trying to fix a problem from within rather than getting outside of the problem. I think the events of January 7th have showed us, at least those of us who are not brainwashed with propaganda, those who still did not realize that this was the case, that none of us are safe anymore. The thing is, we haven't been safe for a really, really, really long time. But there's no doubt anymore. They don't need jurisdiction or authority to do whatever they want. They don't need to follow the rules. The administration will lie and cover up what they do. And they will propagandize so hard that every one of their followers, despite seeing what it is that happened, will parrot their lies. For a really long time, I parroted exactly what my dad taught me. And there was a point in my early 20s when I realized fully, was able to put words to it, that he was abusive. And I couldn't get out of the house yet. I didn't have the means to do it. I didn't have a plan in place. It took me 4 years to get out once I realized that he was abusive. When I was able to say it in those words, that he was abusive. And even after getting out 4 years later, it was really hard for me to fully cut ties with him. And he stalked me for a year. And I did nothing to stop it because I was afraid of him. And so I just allowed it to continue and pretended like I wasn't bothered by it. For those 4 years that I was still in his house and I knew that everything was wrong, I laid as low as I possibly could. I didn't pick fights. I didn't stir up trouble. I tried to be as good of a person as I could possibly be and not draw too much attention to myself. And when I was finally able to get out, I cried myself to sleep that night because I couldn't believe that I had actually done it. It's time to start thinking outside of the box, because doing what the system would have you do doesn't help anyone but the system. Doesn't keep you safe. Calling for peace with a system that is determined to be at war with you is like expecting my narcissistic father to realize he was wrong and apologize. Expecting new candidates, new elected officials, or the Democratic Party to step up and save you is like expecting my mom to realize how bad things were and step up and protect us. This is not a time to be delusional about reality. This is not a time to lay down. These are the times that the history books write about. These are the times that create gods. You have to decide where you sit, where you stand. What side of the system are you working for or against? There's no easy way to end this episode. I know this was a pretty heavy topic. I hope it has given you something to think about, and I hope you'll join me next week as we both continue to work on our mosaic in progress. Please don't forget, follow me on social media. Follow me on Patreon, patreon.com/mosaicinprogress. All of my links can be found at linktree.com/mosaicinprogress.